The East Baton Rouge Parish Library believes that a thriving business community is good for us all. That's why we help entrepreneurs start businesses with tools like Gale Business Builder. Keep commerce rolling by providing access to computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi at 14 branch locations. Get a library card. Grow your business at ebrpl.com/business.
Owning a business comes with pressure. There's a limit to what I can do and still keep employees engaged. Fortunately, there's Insperity.
They expand my HR capabilities exponentially,
Helping me with hiring and training while offering my employees competitive benefit options.
since I can focus on other priorities. My staff can thrive,
And my business can grow.
with Insperity, nothing seems impossible.
Good morning and welcome to Strictly Business. I'm your host, Penny Font. This webcast features conversations with Louisiana's most influential CEOs, entrepreneurs, and community leaders, with the goal of providing insights, ideas, and inspiration to help you and your business grow. We want to keep Strictly Business as interactive as possible. So for those joining us live, here's an icebreaker question for you. Submit your vote in the comments, and the results will be posted at the end of the webcast. Strictly Business is brought to you by Insperity and the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Without their support, this project would not be possible. This month, we welcome Congressman Garret Graves, who is finishing out his term in the 6th District as a strong advocate for Louisiana's coastal restoration, infrastructure, and business and industry. Congressman, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you.
As you prepare to leave Congress, what would you say were your top 3 accomplishments since you assumed office in 2015?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question to answer. I think if I were to look locally, just things that really have been impactful at home, some of the infrastructure wins. We had projects just north of Baton Rouge, the Comite project, $1 billion project that has been stuck since the early 80s. South of us, down in the river parishes, the West Shore project that is going to end up being billions of dollars. It's been stuck, and that thing's already moving forward, about $1.7 billion in the bank. Some of the road projects, the new lane on I-10, PQ exit, just really excited about a lot of the infrastructure investments, number one. Number two, leading negotiations on debt ceiling that resulted in the largest savings in American history, able to cut spending by the tune of $2.7 trillion. And just thinking about the impact that's going to have for generations to come in reducing the national debt. And then there are other things that, for different communities have been really impactful. How we're on the cusp of changing the law on Social Security and eliminating this penalty for police officers, teachers, and many other public servants, even getting access to red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico that the federal government was blocking. So just a lot of great wins that we're excited about, and things that we literally learned about from diner conversations and meeting people where they are. And I think that those round out some of our top accomplishments that we really worked hard to achieve.
Definitely a lot there. One of your major priorities has been coastal restoration, hearkening back to your days with the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. You've been behind numerous projects during your time in Congress, the most recent being the Morganza Reach A. So give us the 60-second overview, or a little longer than that, of how the pieces fit together and strengthen coastal resilience in Louisiana. What's the big picture there?
Sure. It's an important question, because I think prior to Hurricane Katrina, we believed that our only tool in the tool chest to protect our communities were things like levees and flood walls. We now understand that there's a much larger suite of tools. And so the Morganza to the Gulf project is an important project for communities in Terrebonne and Lafourche Parish to provide them with hurricane protection. But you also have to keep in mind that those projects are complemented with restoration of barrier islands, like, for example, the Timberlair Islands over on the east side, and the Whiskey Island over more toward the west, Point of Fur, and some of these other restoration projects that provide additional buffer buffer between the Gulf of Mexico storm surge and those levees. So it's all about how you lay out projects as a portfolio to protect communities. And those restoration projects really do complement this Morganza project that once again has been stuck since 1992. And we're able to break the logjam, get that project funded, and have over $1 billion in the bank today.
That's amazing. What ongoing challenges do you see ahead for coastal resilience in Louisiana? And what are the logical next steps? In other words, what measures need to be taken to better protect Louisiana from worsening storms?
So this is really important because you can look back historically, and we've been able to pull through from various funding streams. And at one point, I counted, and we had 42 different funding streams who were all funding our coastal efforts. So, and we've been able to pull together somewhere around $1 billion. And whether it's disaster funds, whether it's recovery funds, whether it's BP, the Deepwater Horizon settlement funds, of course, some of the revenue sharing legislation we've enacted from energy revenues. But looking forward, right now, it's very difficult to see how the state's going to maintain $1 billion plus level of funding. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges facing our state, is how to maintain those levels of investment in protecting our communities across coastal Louisiana. We recently were able to reauthorize the Coastal Wetlands Planning, Protection, Restoration Act. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow for about $100 million a year in coastal restoration funds to come into our state. But we're going to obviously have to really try and ramp those funding levels up. Going to be one of the biggest challenges we have moving forward.
How do you see various aspects of Louisiana's economy potentially evolving and becoming more competitive with some of these infrastructure improvements that we've talked about?
Well, look, there's no question that the fundamentals of Louisiana are strong, whether it is our amazing geographic location being at the lower end of this Mississippi River, giving us access to 31 states going north, the world going south, low energy prices, really important to have a value-added workforce, a strong workforce in the state of Louisiana, abundant natural resources, readily available energy sources like natural gas. So all of these are assets. We're an incredible state, especially for manufacturing, for intermodalism, and for trade. And I feel like one of the biggest challenges our state faces is how to best utilize those assets in a way that's strategic and actually benefits us. You know, for example, you go back and you look at COVID, Louisiana was the only state in the South to lose population during that period of time. How does that happen when you have so many strategic assets or advantages? I really think that the thing Louisiana needs to do is be more strategic about how to best utilize those assets in a way that benefits our community, benefits our economy.
It's an interesting point. So give us a to-do list. What further measures are needed to further secure Louisiana's infrastructure? And what additional investments do you think are critical, specifically for Louisiana's ports?
Yeah, so on the infrastructure, one, look, be very candid and simple. The state needs increased investment. We've underinvested in our roads and bridges. We've underinvested in our resiliency or our flood protection type infrastructure. And we have been able to bring in record levels of federal funding, about $8 billion in federal funds, but the state needs to invest more there. We just had Hurricane Francine and saw the benefits of some of the investments that we've made. It held back the storm surge. It prevented this from becoming a catastrophic disaster. So that's one thing that I think is really important. In regard to the ports, I think the biggest thing the state needs to do is that you have this Mississippi River system, but starting on the lower end, you have the Port of Plaquemines, Port of St. Bernard, Port of New Orleans, Port of South Louisiana, Port of Baton Rouge. You cannot have all of these competing jurisdictions that are largely cannibalizing one another rather than working to lift up the state holistically. We're watching as adjacent ports in Houston, in Mobile, in Gulfport, in Miami, all the way around Savannah, and in Charleston, their numbers of activity are significantly increasing while ours are going down. And I think it's because we're not being strategic, and instead we're allowing these fiefdoms to cannibalize one another. Really glad the state has stepped up with this new commission looking at the river. I think that is going to be key to the future growth of our port. And I think you've got to stop this disparate management and cannibalization that's happening.
Great points. Let's shift gears a little bit. How are energy policies helping Louisiana become a key center in the energy transition? And secondarily, how do you envision the state's role in national and global energy production changing over the next several decades?
Well, first, I want to say that I think that energy policy over the last few years has really been short-sighted. I don't think they've had the expertise that has really been thinking through the implications of energy policy. And that you look back, we've seen higher prices, we've seen more dependence upon foreign energy sources, and we've seen largely higher emissions than compared to other strategies. So Louisiana's role under a rational energy policy means that we will be producing more energy. Look, it comes down to simple math. It is crystal clear that you're going to have an increase in demand for energy globally, including oil and natural gas. Louisiana offshore has some of the cleanest sources of those conventional fuels in the world. So rather than stopping production in those areas, as we've seen under this administration, the first year in decades that we haven't even auctioned off or opened up some of these new lease areas for energy production, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a shift back to actually producing more. So what that means is a larger role for Louisiana's energy resources in terms of global energy demand. Let's cut off the Russian market. Let's cut off the Iranian market and replace it with Louisiana energy that's cleaner, also benefits our economy, puts more people to work while defunding these wars in Ukraine and in Israel and the Middle East. So I think you get some huge win-wins there, wins for the environment, wins for this warmongering that's happening and terrorism that's being funded, and obviously huge wins for home, and that you got cleaner energy and a whole bunch of jobs and economic activity that our state's benefiting from.
Along those lines, what economic opportunities do you envision emerging in Louisiana over the next few decades?
Well, so you said along those lines, and it's a really important point to bring up. So if you look at this increased sensitivity toward greenhouse gases, what we've got to do is figure out, number one, how do we use Louisiana's energy resources in a way that's cleaner, which means continuing to use our conventional fuels like oil and natural gas, but doing it in a way that is also a lower emissions trajectory or net zero. And one of the things that's been discovered in our state is the ability to sequester greenhouse gases. Louisiana is both geographically and geologically some of the best territory on the entire continent. And so what we've got to do is find those areas where you can safely sequester greenhouse gases, obviously working with the communities, but we could develop an entire new industry here. So not only profit from energy production and exploration in our state, but also profit from the reduction of greenhouse gases. Our state is in such a tremendous opportunity or position to benefit from this, but it's going to take somebody who understands these global markets and is able to play our cards right to where we take advantage. I'll tell you the two places that can benefit if they play their cards right are Louisiana and Texas. And I don't want Texas to get ahead of us here. I think we've got some great opportunity and we shouldn't let them pass us up. I think we can all benefit if we do this right.
Yeah. Shifting a little bit again, can you share examples where your efforts in Congress directly helped Louisiana businesses, and what policy changes do you believe could further support Louisiana's small business?
Well, so two examples. One of them is when we did the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, reducing corporate income taxes, reducing taxes for small businesses that are LLCs and other S corps. And so what that did is it allowed us to be more competitive. And one thing you have to keep in mind, the world is shrinking. We have companies all over the capital region, all over South Louisiana, that aren't just selling in Baton Rouge or in adjacent parishes. They're selling all over the globe. As a result of the internet and online sales. And so whenever we're reducing taxes in the United States, it actually helps us to compete globally. And so that's one thing. Something else, and I'll tell you, a lot of small businesses would confirm this, is some of the work that we did during the COVID pandemic and trying to provide some bridge funding and some tax cuts for employee retention and incentives and things like that for these businesses. The number of multi-generation small businesses that told me that there's no way they would have been able to keep the doors open and stay afloat without that assistance is absolutely huge. So I think those are some of the things that we've done. Moving forward, look, just next year, if we don't do some changes, revisions, and extensions to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, you're going to see a tax increase to the tune of 2.4 to 2.5 trillion dollars to individuals and small businesses. So that's something that's absolutely got to happen. And the last thing that I'd bring up that I think is so critically important is I feel like there are too many obstacles or impediments to actually starting a small business. I think that threshold is too high. And this is something that goes from local government, state government, and the federal government. I think that the threshold is too high, too many hoops to jump through. And I think we've got to really continue working, and not just at one level of those three levels of government, but I think we've got to work together across all three levels of government and realize that if we can streamline that process, creating more businesses, that's how you create more jobs. That's where more jobs are created than anywhere else. It helps with innovation. It helps with efficiency. And I think that we really need to help to streamline that process. So lower taxes and making sure that we lower the threshold to new small business owners.
Some very important points there. Thank you for sharing that. In what areas do you believe Louisiana industry and communities remain underserved or overlooked in federal policy?
Well, look, I think that one of the things, and we spent a little bit of time talking about this on the front end, Louisiana bears the brunt of both draining the largest watershed in the world from Montana to New York to Canada. And all that water comes to us. We're at the bottom of the funnel. And I don't think that people think about that appropriately. They don't think about what's in the water, what they're discharging to us, or the volumes of water. And so I think that the federal government, while we've made a lot of progress in recent years, the federal government really needs to think about the additional burden that they're putting on our state, and that we're the ones who potentially flood as a result of these high water years, even though we have the Bonacari and the Morganza spillway. This causes major threats, problems, increased insurance costs in some cases to our communities. So that's one thing. I also think as you sit there and look at the Florida Everglades, you look at Great Lakes, you look at Chesapeake Bay and these other larger ecological restoration projects, I don't think that coastal Louisiana is getting the respect that it deserves in terms of financial investment. Great Lakes is some of the states like Michigan and Ohio, Illinois, some of these battleground states, and also very populated states, Florida, politically significant, high population. I think they're benefiting from their geopolitics, whereas Louisiana, from an ecological perspective, is much more important than they are. And I don't think that we're getting the same funding levels, and certainly not those that we deserve from an ecological productivity perspective and safety of our community perspective. So that's one area. Another one that I'll throw out is that we've made a lot of progress. In fact, I drafted the law that allows us to get a portion of offshore energy revenues today that's in law that allows us to invest back in coastal restoration and flood protection. But I do think that needs to be enhanced to allow Louisiana to get higher percentages, because it's all about the resiliency of our community. So those are a few areas where I think the federal government needs to make some tweaks. We've made some headway, but I think there's more progress that ultimately we deserve.
Some great insights there. Are there upcoming federal initiatives you think Louisiana should prioritize?
Well, so I do think that with the new administration, you're going to see a lot of changes in energy policy and a lot of changes in infrastructure policy. Louisiana needs to make sure that it has a voice at the table. I mentioned how there's huge opportunity for Louisiana in international energy policy and production if we play our cards right. Louisiana needs to make sure there's a voice at the table, make sure that our offshore plays an increasing role there, make sure that we have the appropriate protections and regulations in place to benefit from the opportunities for carbon sequestration, greenhouse gas sequestration. This could truly be an industry that rivals our energy industry in terms of importance and economic activities. And then one of the others is in infrastructure policy. You know, Louisiana has more bridges per mile than any other state, I believe, because of all of our waterways and the ways that we drain. I made some changes to laws recently that allow us to benefit from that, meaning get more money for that. But we've got to increase the investment in our infrastructure. I think the federal government can play a role there to complement increased infrastructure investment from the state of Louisiana. So those are going to be two big changes. I think you see a Trump administration make big changes in priorities in infrastructure, big changes in energy policy, and those could be game changers from the state of Louisiana, for the state of Louisiana. So we've got to have a loud voice at the table protecting Louisiana's interest as these conversations move forward.
A lot of work to be done.
There is.
Do you think, I want to step back for a minute, do you think that public perception of Louisiana has shifted during your time in office? And just explain why or why not, and in what ways?
Yeah. Well, so look, on the one hand, you have the state of Louisiana. For the first time in American history, you have a state that has both the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader. And you have the state of California that has like 52 members of Congress. Louisiana, we have 6. That's it. We just have 6. And yet 2 of ours are in leadership. So that's amazing. It certainly has raised the profile of the state of Louisiana. But look, I think overall, I think that the reputation of the state in regard to being a place to invest, I think that it's gone down a bit. And this isn't just my opinion. There's statistics that show the same thing. So the thing that I just get baffled and frustrated by, I'll say it again, baffled and frustrated. You have a state that has some of the lowest electricity rates in America. You have one of the most developed port systems and maritime transportation system access in the country. And of course, it's the cheapest way to transport things. You have a high value-added workforce, abundant natural resources, readily available energy streams. How in the world are we not blowing away everybody else? How is it that we're falling behind? And so, look, I think that our fundamentals remain very, very strong, but obviously with us losing population, with our economy and jobs decreasing relative to the national average, I think that it's clear that Louisiana's reputation is not as stellar as it needs to be. And I'm going to go back and revisit what I said earlier. I think that we've got to do a much better job strategically using the assets, the resources that we have in the state to benefit us. And one example that I'm really excited about that I mentioned earlier is how they're taking a fresh look at how to better integrate our ports operating on the Mississippi River, because it's a huge, huge opportunity for us moving forward.
Some very valuable insight there. Thank you. Are there any projects you regret not completing during your tenure?
Yeah, I gotta admit, there's a big one. I was really hopeful that we were going to be able to begin turning dirt on a new Mississippi River bridge. I think it's fundamental to the Capital Region's future. The fact that we call a new bridge a bridge that was built before I was born, something's wrong. I'm going to quote former Iberville Parish President Mitch Uso, and also say that here we built this Audubon Bridge that's beautiful, and I'm really glad that New Roads in St. Francisville have that crossing, but they called it the Audubon Bridge because it ought to have been built further south, and so, look, we can't keep building these memorials to political stupidity. We've got bridges that have a fraction of the traffic capacity that they could potentially meet or provide, and then we have bridges like the I-10 bridge that is so overwhelmed, and so that's a huge regret. How in the world it took the state of Louisiana 7 years to come up with 32 different alignment options. I could have given a 2-year-old a crayon and we could have knocked that out in about a minute. Just incredibly frustrating. I think this project has been fumbled by administration after administration after administration, and I suspect that was intentional because we know the cost of this bridge is going to be extraordinary. Probably went from $1 billion 10 years ago to probably approaching $2 billion today. Now they're looking at doing alignments that would connect White Castle and St. Gabriel. And if that's what the data shows, I'm all in. But I also want to be crystal clear on this. The state will be making a huge mistake if they just invest in a crossing down there without making improvements in the I-10 190 corridor. So what I would strongly urge them to do, and what we had worked on, including passing legislation to the House of Representatives, is it creates a comprehensive corridor where you're actually doing improvements to the the I-10 190 corridor, as well as that White Castle St. Gabriel connection. That way you're truly providing relief to the I-10 corridor, I-10, I-12 corridor that's needed, as well as addressing this future growth and providing crossings for the, for Dow employees and Plaquemine and those areas farther south. So really, really frustrated that we weren't able to make more progress there, but this one needs to stay on the front burner, and we need to make sure that the governor and the legislature hear about this problem every single day until it's fully addressed.
Can you tell us how you really feel about that? Thank you. What lesson did you learn during your time in office that was most surprising to you?
Gosh, I think I went to Congress anticipating that that there was this great brain trust of people that were really thinking through and all these amazing ideas and thought behind things sometimes. And I feel like I got up there, pulled the curtain back behind the Wizard of Oz, and truly found truly found somebody there sitting at the controls that maybe underwhelmed me a bit. And so I think that was one of the bigger things. Look, I'll also say that one of the other things I learned is that as much as I may disagree with other members of Congress, they were elected by a majority of their constituents, and I think that they are owed respect as a result of that. And all these people that run for office and go out there and make these absolute dictates about how they're going to go up there and do X, Y, or Z, and then you see them achieve absolutely nothing. Folks that fail to recognize that you're one of 535 people in the United States Congress representing all 50 states in our territories, and that you have got to be strategic. You've got to be smart. No one goes out there and issues and said it's my way or the highway, because 100% of the time you're going to get the highway. And I really hope that voters begin waking up to that and stop reelecting the people that are bombastic, provocative, and only have a social media presence rather than someone who actually has points on the board, delivering results, delivering change, and addressing priorities in the communities that they represent. Because you would never, ever hire an employee who is a complete waste of money and time. Yet I watch time and time again where voters rehire politicians that are a complete waste of time and money. And so that's certainly another lesson that I've learned. There's some amazing people in the United States Congress that you've never heard of, yet you probably recognize some of these names of people that have never, ever passed a bill, never advanced the negotiation, never moved the ball forward. And it really is unfortunate that you've got sort of this perverse incentive mechanism to give people attention whenever all they are is bomb throwers without ever getting anything done, whether it's a conservative cause or a liberal cause. All they are is just out there talking smack. So another very powerful lesson learned, and something that has been incredibly frustrating as I've spent more time in Washington.
I appreciate your honesty there. Are there any other thoughts that you have just broadly about the political climate in America today?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that last answer. I think that that really voters need to be thinking more about return on investment. I think that what you've seen is this increased polarization or divisiveness, but not only increased polarization or divisiveness, but voters actually rewarding it, the public rewarding it, 24-hour news stations rewarding it and recognizing it. Look, that's not in our interest. It's really easy to say no. It's easy to vote no, and it's easy to find problems with other people's ideas and beat them up. What actually takes skill is figuring out how to make change, how to figure out how to get a majority of the 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate to actually support something. That's what takes skill. This is the card game of battle versus chess, and you've really got to be thoughtful and strategic about how to truly get things done. I want to be really clear on this. This increased polarization or divisiveness that we're seeing in politics is not in America's interest, because all it's doing is causing us to beat the heck out of one another while we're not actually moving America forward. I am not in any way saying people should give up their ideology, their principles. What I am saying is that you've got to recognize under the political conditions, being a member of Congress, one of 535, you have got to recognize what progress looks like versus perfection. Because again, if your two choices are my way or the highway, you're going to get really used to the highway.
I appreciate that wisdom very much. Thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
Last question. What's
All right.
next for you?
I'm going to eat lunch. Just kidding. Um, so truthfully, I'm not sure yet. We've been so focused on legislation. We have got so many huge bills in the queue right now. We have a bill to extend the state of Louisiana's boundary or ownership of lands out in the Gulf of Mexico, giving us a larger portion of those energy revenues. We've got a bill that would invest $5 billion in the restoration of Louisiana's coast. We've got to get this bill across the goal line just in the next few days. Hopefully that will change this and eliminate this penalty for police officers, firefighters, teachers, and other public servants on their Social Security benefits. So many things that we want to get done before we leave. So that's really where we've been focused. We want to run through the tape, give the voters the full 2 years of service that they elected us to provide, and then we'll be looking what's next later on. I'm really excited that we have a new administration coming in, and we've been in touch with them about opportunities there. But ultimately, we'll see what happens. But I'm sure that we'll be involved in continuing to address priorities in Louisiana and continuing to work on coastal issues and other things that I just find so critically important in our state.
Garret, it's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Hey, thank you. Enjoyed it and appreciate the opportunity.
And thanks also to our viewers for tuning in, as well as our sponsors, Insperity and the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, for making this experience possible. Please join us again for the January 15th episode of Strictly Business. On behalf of our show's director, Tim Coles, and me, enjoy and make your day a great one.